She walked into the lobby with dirt still stubborn in the half-moons beneath her nails, the smell of peaches caught in her hair like a memory. Glass and steel rose around her, immaculate and cold, a cathedral for people who never had to scrape frost from a leaf with their fingers. If this didn't work, they would have to sell off the south field, her mother's ring already gone, traded to a stranger with soft hands and a polite smile. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're reading from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The lobby Kincaid Harvest Group's headquarters smelled faintly of lemon and ambition. A wall-high screen played a loop of drone footage, green expanses of orchards, trucks rolling like veins across a map, men with clean boots shaking hands at sunset. The caption read, "We feed America." The light in the atrium had a tender, flattering quality that made the skin look even toned and content. Lena Duarte had borrowed an olive-green blazer from her cousin that didn't quite fit across her shoulders, and a pair of heels that seemed engineered as pennants. She balanced her thrift store leather folder on her knees and watched the other candidates, a trio of MBA comparing case notes, a lithe woman in navy flipping through a pitch deck on an iPad, a pale young man tying and retying his tie in the reflective glass. Across from her, a receptionist with a neat bun and sky-blue nails smiled without showing teeth. "Miss Duarte, they're ready for you in 15. Lena nodded, swallowing. She took a breath that tasted faintly of oranges. The atrium had a machine that misted citrus water at precise intervals. She liked it better when the valley air smelled of hot hay and sun-warmed fruit, but the city had its own perfume. 15 minutes was enough time to unravel her nerves if she let them. Instead, she closed her eyes and saw the farm, Sagebrush Valley, the road in, the way the light spread thin as butter over the hills at dawn. She saw her father's hands, the brown lines etched deep at the base of his fingers, the whites of his nails permanently stained from years of pulling stubborn weeds. She saw the shallow wells ringed with cracked earth, the sensor arrays blinking dumbly with their red-lidded eyes, promising precision irrigation, promising salvation. A month ago, the Kincaid rep had stood in their kitchen and told them their July yield had fallen below contract thresholds again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Duarte," the rep had said, meaning I'm not sorry. "If trends continue, we'll have to reassess our partnership." The rep had left, stepping carefully to avoid a smear of composited mud by the back door as if it could leap up and stain his suit by sheer malice. Her father had stared at the table for a long time, then, very slowly, opened his hand and set her mother's ring in the center of the wood. "Go," he said, voice rough with pride and disappointment. "You're the one who reads the sky like code. Go show them." She had ridden the bus to the city with that ring wrapped in a cloth in her bag, the cloth smelling faintly of her mother's soap. She had taken it out only once, in a pawn shop with beveled mirrors and men in heavy watches, signed away the last glittering piece of her mother's softness, and tucked the crisp bills deep into the pocket where fear lived. The receptionist's phone buzzed. "They'll see you now." Chapter 2. Silas Kincaid. Silas Kincaid was the kind of man whose smile could open doors and settle debts. On the cover of business magazines, he stood in linen shirts on rooftops, hands in his pockets, the city unspooling behind him like a leash he had learned to hold in one hand. He'd made his first fortune in logistics, his second in buying failing farms and convincing the public that he was saving them. He was 43, handsome in a catalog way, and he had never once in his adult life had dirt dry to a hard crust in the creases of his knuckles. He also had a talent for making people feel like they were being led into a secret, and an equal talent for separating compassion from cost. "Miss Duarte," he said, when she walked in. He extended a hand. She watched his eyes flick for a moment to her calluses and then back up. He didn't flinch, but she saw something there, a neat mental note. "Silas." "Lena," she said, forcing her mouth into that particular shape that made her sound friendly, harmless, grateful to be allowed through the door. The room was glass-walled, a fishbowl of power, Silas at the head, flanked by Nia from HR, who had been so polite in emails it felt like aridity, Marina Bell, CFO, sharp as a paper cut in a cream blouse, and a man in a rumpled jacket with a gentle, distracted air, fingers restless against his notebook. He looked up at Lena and smiled in a way that reached his eyes. "Ili Cho," he murmured. CTO, behind them, as if on cue, the footage looped, apples glistening in the sun. We feed America. We're going to do something unconventional, Silas said. He never said we are going to do something that makes you sweat. This is the last round. We've already seen how you think on paper. Now we'd like to see how you move. He gestured at the screen. Case, this quarter, our Western region partners report below average yields. Weather patterns are volatile. Arbitration with water authorities is ongoing. Your task, propose a plan in 20 minutes for stabilizing yields in the short term without increasing costs or violating water restrictions. Marina slid forward a stack of papers that looked like they had been freshly unsealed with a letter knife. Use only what's in here, and she smiled without warmth. Imagine the board is watching. Lena's hands itched. The paper itch, the urge to flip to the last page to look at the data, to stick her fingers into numbers the way she would into soil, assessing texture and moisture and life. Before we start, Silas said casually, tapping a pen on the table, tell us a little about yourself. Just, he spread his hand, a conductor to an invisible orchestra, the story that isn't on the resume. I'm a farmer's daughter, she said. I learned to read moisture in the curl of a leaf. I know what fields sound like when they're thirsty. When I was 15, I could fix an irrigation line with a bucket, a pair of pliers, and a prayer. I taught myself Python on a hand-me-down laptop in a barn because a tutorial said you could watch the sky without leaving the ground if you knew the right language. Silas glanced at Nia, amused. We have a poet. I have bills, Lena said, and didn't let herself look away. And a family that needs this to be more than a story. Silas laughed, a shade too loud. By all means. 20 minutes. Go. Chapter 3. The case. The packet was thick with numbers, tables of water usage by hourly intervals, sensor readings from the Aquila arrays that Kincaid had deployed across partner farms, satellite images annotated by the intern who'd drawn 1,000 circles around green patches like a child drawing planets. Lena spread the pages like cards, fingertips grazing the ink. She read with her eyes and her hands. Evapotranspiration rates blushed a little too evenly across the map in a way that suggested smoothing. A footnote on page 6 attributed a formula to a white paper from a private lab, Redwood Labs. A cluster of farms on the east side showed improved yields despite lower water allocation. A cluster of small family plots on the west had failed 3 times in 5 weeks, the line trending down as if pulled by gravity. Her mouth went dry. That pattern again. She had watched it play out in her valley. The Aquila system measured moisture, predicted irrigation schedules, decided when water should run in sips or gulps. When it worked, it was magic. When it failed in a way that blamed the farmer. It had failed on their land after a software update pushed on a night so cold the pipes sang. She had torn the code apart by the light of a single exposed bulb, the electric bill overdue, and the night full of moths dying against the glass. There had it been, a miscalibration in the humidity sensor library that undercounted moisture in soils with higher clay content, like theirs. A bias toward larger contiguous plots. She had written a patch and thrown it up on an open forum under a name that made her laugh bitterly at herself, Muddy Hands. She had watched it ripple out, adopted by farmers half a world away. Then she had watched Kincaid's PR machine announce an internal fix like a miracle arrived by helicopter, a photo of Silas with his sleeves rolled and his smile generous. 10 minutes, Marina said. Lena pulled a pen from behind her ear and began to sketch on the blank back of a page. You can't stabilize yields by pretending the sky is a spreadsheet, she said, to the room, to herself. You stabilize them by being honest about what the ground is telling you. She outlined a plan in the shape of a valley, immediate relief by recalibrating Aquila sensors using publicly available soil maps. 2-week trial of edge case farms to validate. Short-term water swaps between contiguous farms to smooth peaks during heat waves, logistically supported by Kincaid trucks during off hours. Targeted shade cloth deployment along rows most subject to sunburn, using Kincaid's unused warehouse stock, and a temporary equity rotation on water priority to correct the algorithmic bias that favored big blocks, the very thing that was starving the small ones. You can't just tell water to be fair, Silas said mildly. You're right, Lena said, but you can tell a machine to stop pretending mass equals merit. She spoke faster now, the rope of fear at the base of her skull loosening into focus. She detailed the logistics, the hauling times, the map of roads that trucks already traveled. She proposed paying farmers for shade cloth installation using credits Kincaid already had budgeted for marketing stunts. She proposed a rotating advisory council, 3 big, 3 small, to meet weekly and adjust flows based on what they saw, not just what was measured. And I'll personally recalibrate the sensors on the trial farms, she added before she could stop herself, because this was more than a job. It was a living vein in the ground she was trying to keep from being cut. Illy was watching her like he was listening to a secret frequency. Marina's pen was a metronome. Sila's had leaned back, expression neutral, as if he were watching a play. "We have 5 minutes," he said, "so let's talk money." He sliced her plan with elegant little motions, asking for numbers she had to calculate while the blood pounded in her head. She did: labor hours, fuel costs, projected yield stabilization under forecasted temperature ranges. He pushed her into the corner of her plan where she knew it was weakest, the legal framework of water swaps during a restriction. She kept her voice steady. It's legally permissible if it's pre-registered as contingency and if the flow doesn't increase net use, just retiming. You have lawyers for that, I have experience. We make sure the paper trail matches the sky. Marina exchanged a glance with Sila's. Nia looked delighted, as if finally bored of the MBA telling them they needed to hire more MBA. "Time," Marina said. Sila's folded his hands. "Thank you." That was lively, he smiled at Nia. "Questions?" Nia asked about team dynamics. Marina asked about risk, public relations mostly, as if the sky could be PR managed. Illy asked nothing until Lena thought perhaps she'd imagined the kindness in his eyes. Finally, Silas leaned forward. "What if I told you," he said, slow and pleasant, "that your plan demands a level of internal agility we simply do not have?" Lena held his gaze. "Then I'd tell you to stop writing press releases about resilience." That pleased him. He liked sparring. "You know, I grew up on a farm," he said, his signature move. "Not so different from yours, I get it, but things look different from up here. Sometimes what feels unfair from a row feels necessary from a map." He would try to turn empathy into capitulation. Lena clasped her hands so he wouldn't see them shake. "Sometimes what feels efficient on a map is theft," she said softly. "You don't hear it from up here, but it sounds like you're well coughing dry in the middle of a heat wave." He sat back, the smile flickering. "We'll be in touch," he said, the words soft as velvet around a blade. The room did not empty, no handshake, no small talk. Just 4 faces watching her, and the screen behind them, looping the orchard dreams. Lena slipped a hand into her bag, and the glass clinked. Chapter 4. The jar was an old mason jar, cloudy around the rim where the rubber had long ago formed to the shape of winter preserves. In it, water milky with silt rolled gently as she set it on the glass table, leaving a ring like an eclipse. Silas looked at it the way a person looks at something that might stain. "What's this?" Marina asked. "Wednesday's well draw from our east line," Lena said. "Sagebrush Valley. Test strips show nitrate content higher than last month. The company line says all our wells are at acceptable levels. The sky says otherwise." Nia took a subtle breath, as if the jar contained the entire story of who she had been and why she had left small towns. Illy leaned forward, hands gentle as he would be with a skittish animal. How did you test this?" Lena reached into her bag again and pulled out a sheaf of printouts with the spines frayed from being pressed between her palms. Downloaded water quality reports. Photographs geotagged and dated. A copy of Kincaid's own sustainability update with the bar charts that made reality look like a friendly staircase. She spread them on the table, not dramatic, just careful. Somewhere behind the glass walls a secretary laughed and then hushed herself because the air in the room had changed. "We've had 3 wells spiking in the last 2 months, Lena said. "It started after the new packaging facility opened down valley. Everyone was excited, jobs, money. The company vans take the back road out. They wash those vans over and over, the water running down to the ditch. You have a retention pond. It has a leak. We're downstream." Silas's smile could slice. "That's a serious claim. It's a serious jar." Marina set her pen down, eyes cutting to Silas. "Silas," he lifted a hand. He didn't look rattled yet. "Miss Duarte," he said, patient, "we manage complex systems. Correlation isn't causation. How would your plan? Because surely you're not suggesting we shut down operations based on a jar. How would your plan address this alleged leak? I'm suggesting you fix your patch, Lena said, and every thread of her restraint threatened to snap. Your patch for Aquila, your patch for the trucks, your patch for the story you tell yourselves, because the problem starts with your math. Ellie's pencil had stilled. What patch? He asked softly. Lena looked at him. In another world, she would have smiled first. Here, in front of the man who turned himself into a river and expected the valleys to obey, she didn't have that luxury. The Aquila sensors undercount moisture in clay-heavy soils after the July 21 update, she said quietly. It prioritized contiguous blocks for water recommendation and starved small parcels at the edges. Farmers like us got blamed. We weren't drowning our fields. We were bookended by an algorithm that thought we were inefficient. I wrote a fix for it. A line of code exactly 19 characters long, because that's all the memory the library would take without crashing. I posted it as an open source patch. You deployed it 2 weeks later. You called it Kincaid Pulse Beta 3. Silas's face didn't change. Marina's did. Illy looked like someone had just told him something he should have known, something that had been sitting quietly in his house for months. Nia's eyes went to the ceiling and back to the jar, as if to ask a god who rarely answered whether today would be different. Prove it, Silas said, soft. He spoke like a hand closing gently around a throat. Because otherwise, you're accusing this company of intellectual theft and negligence in a job interview. 2 words and a colon, Lena said. My mother used to say the earth remembers. I put it in the comment because I was tired and I needed to make myself smile. Check your source. Look for the line, earth remembers true. Illy shot up so fast his chair sighed. He snagged his laptop, fingers finding passwords like prayer beads. The room hummed, the air full of electricity. Silas rolled his pen between thumb and forefinger, the only visible sign of anything that might be feeling. Marina watched Illy's screen, the reflection of the code dancing on her pale blouse. Illy's breath hitched. He looked up, meeting Lena's eyes, which had gone so dry the lids hurt. It's there, he said. He sounded like a man who had found an extra note in a song he'd been playing for years. He looked at Silas, then at Marina, then back at Lena. How did we not? Because it's easy to not see what you don't look for, Lena said. Especially if it makes the numbers better. Especially if the story sounds prettier. Silas leaned back, pen stilled. We made a mistake, he said, smoothly, already adjusting, already recalibrating not only the code but the narrative. And we rectified it. Be grateful we deployed your fix. You've clearly got a mind we could use here. If you're looking for a payout, there are proper channels. Lena's laugh was soft and broke in the middle. If I wanted money, I'd have put my name on it. You did, Marina murmured, almost kindly, in a way. Do you know what else your code touches? Lena asked, turning to Illy. Your scheduling software, your routing, the trucks, the wash cycles. You weight the calculations with the same bias you wrote into the fields. Big lots get to wash their trucks more times because they're high priority, their retention pond capacity measured on a sliding scale of good intentions. Small lots like us get what leaks. We tried to tell your field manager. He took a picture with my father's hands and tagged it resilience. Marina's face hardened. The paper cut turned into a blade. Silas, his smile had evaporated. Enough. It was the tone of a man who expected the universe to stop when he told it to. Lena felt a heat rise in the room, a second sun. Her father had once told her, when she had stood in a field and cried because the trees were too small and the debt too big, this land doesn't owe us a single thing. But we owe it the truth. She wasn't a lawyer, and she didn't have the money to become one. But she had the river of facts and the stubbornness of someone whose life had been told back to her by 1,000 polite men who had never washed soil from their hair with a bucket of cold water and a hand whose knuckles bled. You invited me here to see how I move, she said softly. So watch. Chapter 5, the unraveling what happened next did not feel like a dramatic deposition. It felt like fixing a leak, messy and inevitable. She switched the screen to her old laptop, battered, stickers half peeled, a corner dented from when it fell off the tractor. She had planned a polite presentation. She instead brought up saved graphs. This is the water draw on our farm before and after your July 21 update, she said. Here are 3 farms west of us, similar soil, different parcel sizes. See the dips? She circled them with her finger, the glass warm under her touch. Someone told the sky that the bigger trees drink first. Miss Duarte, Silas began. You made a speech 2 weeks later, Lena said, surprising herself at the steadiness of her voice. She hit play. The video filled the wall. Silas on a stage, sleeves rolled, the town cheering because finally someone loved them. You called it Kincaid Pulse Beta 3. You said your engineers worked overnight to apply a patch to help our family farms thrive. You mixed the language of love with the language of code until it tasted like sugar on a rotting tooth. Nia made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Turn that off, Silas said, not softly now. Marina didn't move to do it. Her face had gone pale in an interesting way, the way of someone who had spent years letting herself be charmed by a man who could explain away the sun. While he was still typing, the screen showed the repository logs, a trickle of text. The tag is in our fork, he said, almost to himself. We merged from public. Production patch notes credit Redwood Labs. Lena let the next reveal sit in her voice like a seed on her tongue. Redwood Labs is a shell, she said. It's a Delaware LLC registered to a holding company called Gray Finch Partners. Gray Finch shares an address with Kincaid Ventures. Marina's head snapped around. Is that true? She demanded. Silas's silence was elegant and damning. Are we done here? He said finally, quietly and dangerous, as if he were a blade encountering bone. Because I'm not going to sit in my own building and entertain conspiracy theories from a candidate who walked in here with a jar. You're going to do more than that, Lena said. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of something too high, the valley spread below her, the sky close enough to press a palm into. You're going to listen to me tell you how I solved your case. She gestured to the plan she'd sketched 10 minutes earlier. Now it looked less like a plan and more like a map of escape. This is how you stabilize yields in the short term, by admitting the bias, recalibrating the sensors, crediting the farmers whose code you used, deploying those shade cloths and using your trucks to support, not supplant. And then what? Silas asked. His mouth had thinned. We give free water. We let ourselves be run by people who cry when the wind changes. There is a thing called scale, Miss Duarte. It is not personal. Then you stop pretending that what you're doing in that valley is charity, Lena said. Because in 2 weeks, your procurement schedule changes. I pulled this off the state's public transport logs. Your drivers will shift to carry imported fruit from the port instead of picking up from our orchards. You'll call it weather-related. She slid another sheet across the table, the dates circled, the routes highlighted. Your board will say this is why we need to buy out the failing farms. The price will be very fair. That's your model. Marina's pen rolled off the table and spun like a dancer to the floor. No one picked it up. Silas looked at the sheet, and in that fraction of a second, the perfect balance of his certainty wavered. It was the pause that good storytellers always hid. He had never expected someone to catch it. Then the smile returned. We're done, he said. He cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but it held the weight of a man who had spent years making beautiful systems without looking hard enough at what they moved. Silas, Ellie said, the tag is in there, so is the weighting. We can fix it. He looked at Lena. We can fix it. Silas turned the kind of look on Ellie that made lesser men apologize for breathing. We have an order of operations, he said. We do not broadcast internal processes in interviews. Good news, Lena said, heart going like a trapped bird. This isn't just an interview. Nia breathed in. Lena, my father's hands, Lena said, feeling behind the words that childlike need to be believed that she rarely allowed herself to admit, are in your archive. Your Instagram used his fingertips holding a peach in October. You tagged it Harvest Heart. He hasn't been able to sleep because the well coughs all night. You sent a congratulatory tin of cookies when we hit a yield target. My mother kissed the ribbon and put it on the windowsill because she said maybe we were finally on somebody's good side. My mom's ring paid for this trip. That's not conspiracy. That's arithmetic. The silence in the room became a physical thing. Then, to Lena's shock, Marina laughed. It was a low, incredulous sound that spoke of 1,000 boardrooms and 1,000 small betrayals that had been tidied so neatly up they never made a noise. You changed my mind, Marina said, eyes cutting to Silas, then back to Lena. There was something like a dare in them. What would you do if you were me? It felt like the kind of question that had windows hidden inside it. Lena took a breath. Call legal, she said. Fix the leak. Send a message to the valley that's not a photo op. Put Ali in charge of a task force to recalibrate. Put me on it. Publicly credit Muddy Hands and the farmers who contributed data. Build the advisory council I proposed. Admit the mistake before someone else admits it for you. And, she felt the word in her, sharp and costly, put someone on the board who's had their fingernails stained by the land for longer than a weekend retreat. Silas stood. This is my company. Marina stood too. And it's my balance sheet, she said, crisp. You want a war with the people who feed us and with the law, be my guest, or we act like we deserve our glossy ads. Illy's mouth moved. We can, stop saying we can, Silas snapped. This is not a community garden. No, Lena said softly. It's a river, you can dam it, you can poison it, or you can share it, but the river does not care what you call it, it runs anyway. Silas pressed his hands flat on the table. His face had chilled to something glacial and old. Miss Duarte, he said. As a courtesy, I am going to make sure you never work in supply chain again. Nia flinched. Marina went very still. Illy looked at the jar as if, inside it, the future were suspended like silt, and if he shook it, the patterns would change. Lena thought of the ring. She thought of the way her mother had bent, that last week, to tie back a vine that had fallen out of order. She thought of a girl in a valley reading code by a single bulb, hoping the sky could be made fair by a 19-character tag. She said, I didn't come here to work in supply chain. Silas blinked once. I came to start a co-op. Chapter 6. The choice. Perhaps it wasn't the smartest place to announce it. Perhaps she had rehearsed a dozen versions of this ending where she took the job, fixed the machine, paid off the mortgage, tucked her parents into houses sturdy enough to keep out winter. But the truth had always been different in her bones. She told them about the co-op, about the group of farmers who had gathered on Tuesdays in the town hall with folding chairs and coffee in stained mugs, bringing their printouts and their grit. About the woman who had driven 2 hours to teach them about rainwater catchments sold at cost by a nonprofit across the state. About Kai, who had a back full of scars from a work accident but never left a meeting without making a joke that made the air less heavy. About the young guy whose family had almost signed a buyout letter until he cried on his porch in front of 3 stoic men who didn't know what to do with the tenderness that had been placed suddenly at their feet like a newborn goat. She described a network that would pool resources, water rights rented collectively so that they couldn't be picked off one by one, a shared booking system for trucks not owned by Kincaid, an open-source platform for calibrating sensors that credited every contribution with names, not bland lab handles, an emergency fund to keep lights on without guns to heads. And yes, a legal fight if it came to it. She would carry the jar to anyone who would test it. She had expected, perhaps, to be dismissed, to be laughed out, to have security called. Instead, Illy shut his laptop and looked at her. It wasn't pity. It was something more dangerous, respect. I can help you, he said, off the record, with code, with access to calibrations we can publish. Marina's mouth twitched with something like the first smile she'd allowed herself in years that had not been strategic. You might be the most dangerous person who's walked into this room in a while, she said. Do you want to burn it down or change it? Neither, Lena said. I want to feed us and sleep. Nia stood. Without meaning to, Lena stood too. They looked at Silas. Somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged. On the screen, a drone panned over an orchard so green it seemed obscene. I can't stop you from starting your little club, Silas said, smooth, dismissive, like a man deciding to swat away a mosquito instead of the bullet it was. But I will not fund my own defamation. I didn't ask you to, Lena said. She reached out and took the jar back. The water shivered. She wiped the ring it had left with the cuff of her borrowed blazer. It was a silly, stubborn act. It meant nothing to a table that had cost more than her truck and less than Silas's watch. But she wanted to leave the room as she had found it, with the evidence in her hands. Marina walked with her to the door. At the threshold, she said quietly, I'll make a call. You'll get a visit from a water specialist who owes me a favor. That leak will get plugged if it's real. It's real, Lena said. Then it stops. Marina extended a hand. And Lena took it, surprised at how warm it felt. Yes. Sometimes the board needs a story, Marina said. Give them one that makes them think their souls are at stake. Lena nodded. The elevator doors opened, and there was the lobby again, lemon and ambition, the citrus mist side, the glow flattering. People passed her without seeing her. Outside, the city was a mosaic of windows and exhaust and possibility. She stepped into it like a field. Chapter 7. The After the Co-op did not grow like a miracle fruit. It grew like a weed in a windstorm, crooked, stubborn, leaving scratches. The first meeting after the interview, only half the chairs filled. The next, the folding table wobbling beneath jar after jar that glinted under the fluorescent hum. The county water specialist, Marina's favor, probably showed up with a kit and a job title on a badge that made the room sit up straighter. He tested the jars. He took notes. He listened. Two men who had laughed in Lena's face during her first round of visits now sat in the back, arms crossed, listening the way men in the valley had learned to listen, quietly, skeptically, but with the door in their minds cracked open. Kai built a map that looked like art, strings of red thread linking wells to who drew from them, to who was down valley, to who had a hand when the ditch got clogged with leaves. They clicked post on their platform. Muddy hands, but this time with a list of names next to every line of code. Alfredo C., whose British colonial kit irrigation system was a relic, but still had parts they could hack. Sujatha V., who had 4 daughters and a knack for finding the bug that only appeared when a sensor was left in direct sun for an hour. Tony W., who hadn't spoken in meetings until he discovered he was good at making antennae from scrap, and was suddenly a man with a skill everyone needed. Ellie sent patches at odd hours from an email account that was as anonymous as you could make something and still feel the shape of Ellie in it. He never said he was sorry. He said, try this. He said, don't say where you got it. They built a fun jar. Real jar, coins clonking, bills folded. Digital jar, too. The first donation came from someone in Wisconsin, a woman who wrote, "My grandpa lost his farm. I still dream about the way cornfields make sound in wind." The second came from an anonymous account that Lena suspected was a secretary at Kincaid. The third came from Marina, under the name Finchwatcher, and Lena laughed when she saw it and then cried because something sharp inside her unclenched. Because Aquilor recalibrated. Because the leak got patched and then audited. Because the algorithm's weighting was changed, publicly, credited to collaborative input from our partners, with the phrase Earth remembers now quoted on marketing materials, in a way that made Lena grind her teeth, and then smile, because sometimes the sky stole your words and dripped them back down as rain. Because the trucks showed up as scheduled, and then because one day they did not, and the co-op's borrowed truck went out instead, driven by a teenager who had only learned to drive 3 months before, and came back with a load of fruit that would have gone soft if he hadn't believed he could become a bridge. And because the board called Silas into a room without windows. There was no headline that said Silas Kincaid was forced out. He did not weep on TV. He did not apologize. He simply wasn't on the cover anymore. A press release announced he would be transitioning to new opportunities. And Marina stood behind a podium and said the words resilience and partnership so many times that they sounded briefly like different words. Lee did not take his job. He asked for a different title, Director of Field Systems, the kind of role that required him to go outside and get sunburned on his neck. He wore a hat when he remembered. The story traveled. Before the first peaches of the fall were ready, there were messages in Alina's inbox from people in places she had never seen, grasslands and city balconies and villages where the dirt was red as rust. They sent photos of jars and code. They wrote about wells that coughed, about sons who'd left, about brothers who came back, about women who sat on courthouse steps and waited for papers to be signed, and when they were, did not cry until they were in their car where the air conditioner could blow cool against their neck, and the sound would be eaten by the hum of the engine. Once a package arrived, inside a ring. It wasn't her mother's, of course. It was a ring with a stone like a drop of morning sky. She wore it when she drove, a talisman of strangers. On a Sunday late in the season, she went out to the south field. The trees there had been stunted for years. She ran her fingers along a branch and felt the change the way you know when weather is about to turn, the air loosening, the birds loud with a knowledge you hadn't yet caught. The leaves drank, the lines sang. It was not magic, it was math and outrage and kindness. Her father came to stand beside her. He had stopped wearing his best shirt to meetings because he had realized that men in ties didn't deserve his good clothes. He put a hand on her shoulder, then pulled it back as if remembering that children in this valley grew up faster than the trees. "I saw your picture in the paper," he said. "You looked like your mother when she had her mind set on a new row." Lena laughed, then swallowed it. I never liked my picture. Me neither, he said, but I liked that one. A pause. That jar on the table, what did it sound like when you put it down? Like home, she said. Like I was not alone. The future, it did not end in a courtroom. It did not end with a cinematic takedown that made the crowd scream. It ended and began a dozen times in small places. In a Kincaid conference room where Nia, bored of HR memos that turned people into metrics, started a policy that allowed field staff to add comments from farmers to their reports in a section called The Sky Said. In a diner where a truck driver decided not to wash the van out back because he liked the waitress, and she had told him about the ditch. In a board meeting where Marina slid a sheet across a table with numbers that added up to the quiet radical idea that paying fairly could sometimes make you richer, and when a man raised his eyebrow, she lifted her chin in a way that made him look away. In a field where Lee crouched and got dirt under his nails for once and thought he could live with it. And in a job interview, remembered by everyone who had been in that room, even the person whose job it was to water the ficus and wipe the fingerprints from the glass. The way a girl in a blazer too tight across the shoulders set down a jar like a lit candle. The way a man who had built an empire realized, too late, that he had taught people to speak his language, and now they were using it to tell him the truth. Conclusion months later, at a harvest fair that smelled of sugar and livestock and sun, a woman came up to Lena and pressed an envelope into her hand. "It's silly," the woman said, already embarrassed, "but my daughter made this. She says she wants to be you." Inside, a drawing in crayon, a girl with a laptop in one hand and a peach in the other. Behind her, a river. Above her, words printed in serious, wobbly letters, "The Earth remembers." Lena felt a strange, tender ache. She bent and whispered into the child's ear, "So do we." That night, when the sky went violet and the crickets started to sing, she sat on the back steps and listened to the well. It did not cough. When the faucet opened in the kitchen, the water ran clear, not milky. Her mother's ribbon caught the last of the light, a narrow red line like a boundary on a map or a mouth saying no. Her father washed his hands, the water slipping through the familiar cracks and lines, finding the old scars and making them feel new again. In the city, Silas stood in a penthouse and stared at his reflection. He had not been ruined. He would discover a new industry to love until it loved him back. He would tell 1,000 more stories, some that would make people feel like heroes, some that would make people feel like they were finally being seen. Perhaps someday he would wake in the night to the sound of water moving through pipes and think of a jar set softly on a table, like a heart laid bare. On a screen in the lobby of the headquarters, the footage had changed. Still orchards, still sunset, still gleaming trucks. But now, in the middle of one loop, the camera held for 3 extra seconds on a hand, rough, dirty, whole, reaching into a tree and curling around a piece of fruit. The caption read in small letters, "We listen." It wasn't enough. It wasn't nothing. If you had been in the room that day, you might have felt that a story was binding itself to people, not to brands. You might have seen a woman with a jar and a plan change the temperature in a space designed to make the body forget it was alive. You might have heard the first crack in a glass ceiling that wasn't really a ceiling at all, but a lid. When she went to sleep, finally, Lena dreamed she was walking through rows that went on and on. The dew stuck to her calves. The sky was full of codes and constellations. Someone was ahead of her, just out of reach. It was her mother. She turned. She held out a hand. "You did good," she said, and when Lena took that hand, it felt like a jar set gently on a table, the water inside settling after a long, long journey. The water remembered. So did she. So did the earth. And somewhere, a girl in a city far away was drawing a river with a crayon, the wax a thick, beautiful line that refused to stay inside the shape someone else had traced.